Hey guys, Seth the Mad Dog here again. It's time for an update on my vlog, the biggest and best general. Wah! Alright, so I'm back from Cherokee, and I managed to get 6 great games in there. Right off the top, I went 4-2. I lost 2 games. I was 4th place in Orks, so didn't win best Orc. So, gotta show some improvement, right? So, let's take a look through how I did at Cherokee, how the list functioned, and maybe what the next steps are for me at this point. Quick review, here's the list, boom, back up on the screen. If you want more details on the list, go back and watch the last episode. But that's the list I took. I did, like I said at the end of the last video, get some practice games in against some of the harder factions. Felt like I had some playable matchups there, so I didn't make any changes and just took it as it was off the Cherokee. So, let's see how I did game-wise. That's my game results. Now, I ended up going 4-2, so I dropped a game against Imperial Knights, and I dropped a game against Necrons. But I won games against Genestealer Cult, which I played twice, Tau, and Dark Angels. Let's go through those matchups and see how they felt. So this is the score off the Dark Angels matchup. Michael was a great player. He was not playing the list of Dark Angels that we saw Stephen Crawley play at the event, where it was a bunch of Storm Shield Terminators. He did have like 30 Terminators, but there was mixed arms there. There was a lot of Storm Bolters, which isn't great into my Horde. It's not good for me, but he had less things with a 1-up armor save and 4-up invuln. So I was able to use the Mega Knobs and some of the shooting actually from the Tank Busters to do some effective damage there. I was able to, he took a Psychic secondary, as you can see, Warp Ritual. I got a chance to charge Ezekiel early in the game and put him out of action, which zeroed out that secondary. So I wasn't able to do the primary denial as well with this list as I wanted in this matchup because of those Terminators, but being able to get Ezekiel out of the game quickly meant that I didn't have to worry so much about that because I was going to zero one of his secondaries there. This was my second matchup, and this was actually one of the ones that I was kind of most worried about because this was the first time I played against Genestealer Cult in 9th edition. So I didn't really know what was going to happen playing against Pedro. Pedro was a great guy. He ended up taking a Twisted Helix list, but he had like a Brood Brothers with a few Leman Russ tanks. I drastically underestimated the amount of shooting because I thought Twisted Helix was going to be a combat-based list. He had a lot of things like Metamorphs and Genestealers. And so I went first, and I did what I thought I needed to do, which was spread out the army and take up as much real estate as I could. And then Pedro picked up 60 bodies. He picked up like 30 of my Storm Boys, a unit of Commandos, a unit of Beast Snaggle Boys, and a unit of Gretchen. So that really put me on the back foot. But I was able to stay in the game and keep knocking his primary down because he didn't have that much OBSEC in his list. So I was able to get that 15 point differential that I needed on that primary to stay in the lead. And that ultimately, between that and doing pretty decent on a lot of my secondaries, managed to get me the win on that one. My last game on day 3 was against Imperial Knights by a great player by the name of Noah Bedham. Noah's out of the Pacific Northwest. I've known him before. We just never had a chance to play a game. Noah brought an Imperial Knights list that was House Raven. And this is one of the games I lost. And so I had to stop. When you have a loss, you got to stop and evaluate. And on this one, it was pretty obvious what happened to me. Noah was explaining Knights, and Knights have a lot of rules, and one of them is becoming virtuous. And I kind of was like, well, there's white noise to me. But his particular Knights, when they became virtuous, they all gained OBSEC, not just the small Knights, but also his large Knights as well. And so he had 2 large Knights, which would be OBSEC 10 models, and when he was virtuous, his little Knights went from OBSEC 5 to OBSEC 8. And I never really had seen a Knight army go virtuous before, so I didn't think it was going to be something that I would have to worry about. I didn't pay too much attention to the mechanics that would allow him to become virtuous. Well, as you can see on the score here, turn 3, Noah got virtuous. And then I was unable to stop his Knights from scoring primary. I did pretty well in my turn 3, getting a 12, but after that, Noah just ran 12s up on the board. I couldn't stop him. So my game plan of I'm going to be on primary denial didn't work in that matchup. We were playing the Scouring, which is also a really tough mission when your opponent has that many big obsects, because I have to come to the midfield. I have to engage to get some primary points. And Noah was just better at killing me than I was at killing him. And he had a lot more obsec bodies, so to speak, than I had at that point. So that put me on a really tough spot. What would I do different? How would I change? We're going to talk about it a little more. It might be something as severe as a list change, but this could also just be something that maybe if I played different and paid attention to his when he was going to become virtuous, I could have saved some assets for later in the game, so I would be able to put more bodies on objectives than he had. I didn't save that much. I kind of just pushed forward, trying to kill as many things as I possibly could, as fast as I could, and I just wasn't able to stay up in the primary game. I still scored a respectable amount of points. 86 points is a lot for a loss, but I couldn't stop Noah. He only dropped 3 points total, so it wasn't enough for me to catch up. Round 4, I got a second Gene Stealer's Call player, and this was Nick. Nick was playing kind of the more, not say traditional, but more of the meta shooty list. I had a much better understanding of how to play this matchup, and unfortunately for Nick, this was Tide of Conviction, which was a hold 2, hold 3 mission. He did go first, and he actually went first and had a unit of Gene Stealers charge into a unit of commandos that I had up kind of near my deployment zone line. And Gene Stealers are strength 4. He wounds me on 5s. He got in there. He got a bunch of attacks. This was his rune roll though, and that bounced. So that kind of kept one of my assets on the table. And then as you can see on the score here, he did good with his behind enemy lines and no prisoners, and even not so bad on his retrieve battlefield data. But I was able on my turn 1 to basically charge into his backfield of Goliaths with turn 1 Wog with some Storm Boys and a dejumping unit of Beast Snaggle Boys, and basically stole all his objectives from him at the beginning of the game and never let him back into the primary game. So he got 4 points on primary to my 45. So the primary denial was in full effect in that matchup. The list worked like it was supposed to, and this was my second game now against Gene Stealer Cult. I knew some of what was going to happen to me, and I did get a little lucky with some bad rolls on Nick. Sorry, Nick. My round 5 was another one of my losses. This was against Steve Page running Necrons. I believe it was Nihilek. It's the dynasty where everyone gets OBSEC, and when you're in your deployment zone, you make AP 1 into AP 0. This was a game where I made some big mistakes on the top of 1. Top of 1, I said I had a good board position. I went first. I saw the opportunity with some Storm Boys that if I wogged, I was able to get out and maybe tag a bunch of his stuff and keep him in his deployment zone, which for me felt like it was going to be pretty good because that would basically take all the pressure off me for good bits in Green Tide and let me really try to control the primary. The problem was when I wogged turn 1, I only had 3 charges that I could make, which were 2 units of Storm Boys and a unit of Commandos. The Commandos missed their charge. Both Storm Boys made it in, but that was not enough to contain Steve. He was able to use some of his faster moving things like Tomb Blades and Scarabs and get out to contest my objectives on 1. So then when it came to turn 2 scoring, I only got a 4 primary. And those Storm Boys were not able to really hold up his army. And then because of how that turned out, after I lost those Storm Boys, it was not a whole lot of exposure with just the Storm Boys and Commandos out there. But then in my turn 2, I'm only a 6-up invuln, and now I've got to commit, and he hasn't come that far out of his deployment zone yet. He's able to do a lot of damage. I made some pretty big mistakes on my secondaries by picking Assassinate. He had 2 Satan and a Cryptek and the Hexmark Destroyer and the Silent King, and I thought, I'll be able to pick all that up, and I picked none of it up. The score is not entirely accurate here. I had to call that game short for some personal phone call I had to take, so the no prisoner score is probably not accurate. He probably would have scored more there. So in hindsight, I needed to be reserved and not wog turn 1 so that I could hit him with more units in turn 2 and have that 5-up invuln for turn 2 and a 6-up for turn 3. And I might have been able to stay ahead on the primary game. I don't know that Assassinate would have gotten me any more points. I probably should have gone with something different there. I don't necessarily know what that is. Maybe I go with Psychic Interrogate in this matchup, but he does have the ability to have a deny with the Silent King and a 4-up deny. So a Psychic Secondary didn't feel great there either. So I'm not really sure what the secondary choice should have been there. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments, what I should have taken against this Nihilic army of Necrons. My last game was against Tau with Cordell. He's one of the Death or Glory guys. He was a newer player. He had not played against Orks before. We ended up having a fun game. It was the end of 6 rounds. My back was tired, and I was able to really put Cordell in a corner very quickly by basically completing like 6 or 7 charges on turn 2. Turn 1, I managed to, with terrain, hide to really minimize his shooting. He didn't do much damage to me, so turn 2, I came out, and I think I hit everything in his army except Farsight and a unit of Breachers in combat that turn. And I just tagged everything under the sun and started punching it. So it ended up being a pretty brutal game in my favor, but Cordell took it great, and he learned a lot from that matchup, and I learned a fair amount because I haven't played against Tau in a bit, so it was good to play against Tau and kind of refresh myself on how that army works. And that was how Cherokee went for me. I ended up, like I said, going 4-2. Now, if you go back to my last video, I chose Death Skulls over Goths because I thought Goths really only work best with kill rigs right now. And I thought kill rigs weren't going to be good into the meta because everyone else is teching for things like Iron Hands vehicles and guard tanks, which are a bunch of T8 things. And our 3-up armor, 6-up invul, and T8 vehicles aren't going to stand up to the firepower that is meant to bring down some of those vehicles. I was wrong. There's no nice way to say it. I was wrong. The number 1 orc player, Marcus, was running kill rigs. He ran 2, I believe, and a battle wagon. And there was multiple other orc players running kill rigs. So there definitely is some room in the meta for kill rigs to work. It certainly is possible that maybe this was too soon, though. Maybe the meta hasn't shifted to counter things like Iron Hands and Guard. And going forward, as the meta gets prepared to deal with those big boogeymans, we will find that kill rigs indeed don't get to stand up. So I could be right. I just might be early in my prediction. Or it could be that Marcus is right and I'm wrong. We're going to have to wait and see on that one. So that's where I need you guys in the orc community to tell me how the events are going so we can figure this out together. Where am I going to go from here? I've got another major in March. It's not as big as Cherokee, but it's still a major event. I'm going to go to that. I'm still up in the air what it's going to be. It might be another iteration of a Death Skulls list, but I do want to try Goths out. I want to see if I can come up with a Goth list that maybe doesn't rely heavily on kill rigs and see if that plays well, because that certainly is going to help some of the matchups where I need a little bit more killing power. Not so much that +1 strength and exploding 6s are going to shift the Marine matchup or the dreaded Dark Angels Terminator Storm Shield spam matchup, but having access to characters like Zagstruck and Gazgal that you can only get through Goths, that might be enough to change some of those matchups. So I want to experiment with those lists and see where I end up. This idea is not my idea alone. I have to give credit where credit is due from my coach, Stephen Box, over at Vanguard Tactics. We actually had a meeting this morning, and we were bouncing these ideas back and forth. And he does want me to at least try those, so I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to do what my coach says. I'm going to try those and see how it feels. But that's it for me. That's it for this update. So I'm super excited to get back out there and try Goths again. I played them predominantly for the last year in terms of my orc matchups. Death Skulls was something new for me. We're going to see how Goths feel. I'm in two different TTS leagues right now. One is on Vanguard Tactics where I have Death Skulls as my list, and another one on the Stat Check Discord. And I might actually try doing Goths there and just, nice way to get regular practice games in with those two factions and see what feels better. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Give the video a like, subscribe if you hadn't. Help boost the channel up. I appreciate it. But until next time, this is Seth the Mad Dog saying have a good wah!